1, 2, 1, 2.
Every year we host a BT lecture, and this year we're delighted that Gabriela is going to be delivering it. But even more important than Gabriela, Mike Payne is going to be chairing the event and introducing Gabriela and fielding all the questions at the end. So, Mike, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm definitely not more important. Just a few housekeeping items to start with. We're not expecting fire alarms, so if one does go off, then we do need to do that, and so follow the stuff. Mobile phones, if you could turn them all off or silent, please. So Gabriela's going to talk for about 35 minutes, and then there will be a formal question and answer session, and then we will turn it to be informal. There'll be drinks here, and so more time to be able to ask questions and network and so on. The lecture is going to be recorded, and there may be some photographs taken, so just be aware of that. And if you're into the modern age, then apparently you can follow the lecture on Twitter using the hashtag BT-Pembroke Lecture. And there's a bunch of other stuff, I don't understand that. So, on to the important thing. So, it's a great pleasure to introduce Gabriela Styf-Sjöman. She's now the Managing Director of Research and Network Strategy at BT, as you can see. Gabriela has had a glittering career in telecoms and networks. She worked for most of the leading companies, taken many executive roles. There are so many, it would take half an hour to list them, and that would be pointless. So let's just pass over to Gabriela, who's going to tell us about the value chain squeeze in telco. Thank you.
Thank you. What an honor and what a pleasure to be among so many highly intelligent people. I just love it. And that's probably one of the things I love also about my job. To be surrounded by people, you know, with diverse, I always say diversity of thought is the most rewarding thing. So really an honor and a pleasure to be here. So what I wanted to share with you today is some of the views of, actually, I would say the core of today's talk is that technology matters. Technology truly matters because technology is at the core of everything that we're doing today. The digital economy, not only digital economy, but actually technology is what enables new business models or disrupts existing business models. But it's not only about the technology, to understand the technology, it's about understanding the so what. This is something that we speak a lot about at BT, in particular research and strategy, to make sure that we translate. And I always say to my dear colleagues in research and strategy, we are the ones in BT who need to help our colleagues. Just like many of you probably also need to play that role of not only knowing the technology, but translating that into so what from a business perspective. And usually I say, is the technology evolutionary to the business model, or is it disruptive to the business model? And if we're not careful and really understanding that, we might be missing out on opportunities. And above all, as I will talk, you can be very disrupted. So that's at the heart of this. I will also speak about how the technology evolution is really changing the way we in organizations think about how we compete. It's all about collaborations, so co-opetition that we all talk about truly is very much also at the center of how you develop new business. And collaboration is not only, with your traditional partners. You also need to collaborate with sometimes your competitors, but even more importantly, you need to collaborate with government. I see a very critical role of government to play a role to orchestrate. I talk about coherent policies are critical for digital economy, but also to orchestrate innovation. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So I will talk about, connectivity more important than ever, especially after COVID, the value chain squeeze, but of course it's not only dark. So there are a lot of opportunities, but it's how do we capture those opportunities? And since COVID, I think COVID really brought to light the importance of digital connectivity. Right? Nothing was more important than staying connected. People to people, organizations to organizations. So digital connectivity has been extremely important, and I would say now more important than ever. Think about it. Who leaves their phones behind? From an enterprise point of view, all these Teams calls, how we share information. So we're going away also not only from the information era, connecting people, we're going to the coordination era. It's all about interactions, it's all about data, and connectivity plays a really important role. However, in the last 8 to 10 years, the only industry that has lost total shareholder return, a negative total shareholder return, is the telecom industry. So not only the telcos, this is in general the overall telco industry, minus 10%. And you ask yourself, how is that possible? An industry that is the lifeline to a digital economy is the only industry globally that has a negative total shareholder return. Really important to understand, right? So I start usually with this one, because also internally we need to, what happened? So, and it's all coming from technology. Over the many years, the evolution in technology, and actually we've been slowly but surely disrupted. We've been disrupted, slowly but surely, without really noticing it, without understanding what's happening, how technology was impacting our value chains. All of a sudden, we are in a super value chain squeeze. And that's why I say technology matters. Not only because technology is super cool, that enables new opportunities, but it's all about the business models. And once again, I often ask, my colleagues and teams, I say, is this technology evolutionary? So I'll give you an example. What's an evolutionary technology in the mobile connectivity space? Well, 4G was an evolutionary technology, right? So it's more capabilities, new technology, bringing lots of new opportunities, but didn't really disrupt the business model. Now 5G, all of a sudden, it's kind of evolutionary for consumers, but more disruptive on the enterprise side. And if you don't understand that it is being disrupted, you also don't understand what you need to change in order to either not be disrupted or to disrupt. So what has happened in the last years? I mean, this is a telecom stack. So if you start at the bottom, we have connectivity, the connectivity and network services. We have the customer relationships and products and services. And 15 years ago, as a matter of fact, in telecoms, we owned the full value chain. So we offered, it was our network, we had the relationship to the customers, both on the consumer side and on the enterprise side, and we offered all the products. All the voice products, messaging products were offered. So it was really an integrated stack. That's why sometimes we talk about the integrated telco, a telco that offers all layers. But these layers the value chain has been delayered. And I'll talk more about this, but it's from technology. So all of a sudden, we see still, of course, very often you see now new players coming in at the bottom on the connectivity, because even connectivity is being disaggregated. We see new platform players coming in, Tesco, Amazon, and we have lots of over-the-top players. And then we as telecom operators, we say, oh, what happened? Everything that we used to offer now is offered also by others. And all of a sudden, that value chain that we were in control of has been disaggregated and we are being squeezed. But did it happen all of a sudden? Oh, and I'll talk in this also. So, you know, and what I wanted to say here, very often though, we as telcos now, we feel that it's kind of a bit unfair. Others are taking, you know, our piece of the pie is not growing. Usually I joke and say, well, it's good that others are being innovative on top of our network, otherwise our network probably wouldn't be used. But this picture shows, so in the middle you have the integrated telco still, what British Telecom is. For example, BT, we're an integrated telco. What does that mean? We still have all our physical assets are owned by us, so we offer the infrastructure, we offer the network services, we offer the platform, we also want to offer messaging services, data, voice. But there are others who are eating into the space, shown by the previous slide. And I always say that if this wasn't a healthy business or an interesting business overall, there wouldn't be an interest for other players to enter into the space. So that's the good news, in a way, right? That it's not that people or organizations are not interested or giving up, but because there's such a big disaggregation, once again, enabled by technology, we feel we're being squeezed from the product side, but we're also being squeezed from the infrastructure side. And in addition, one of the challenging things you can see here, the valuation. So revenues, if you see at the bottom, the revenue for an integrated telco, the revenue growth is usually flat at best. There it says 1%, but I said most telcos now have a revenue decline, slightly revenue decline. But you see the others are actually growing. And their valuations are also much better than the integrated telcos. So a lot of food for thought around the business models. But then, as I said, so this is the role of technology and to understand how technology enables not only new opportunities, but whether it disrupts you. This is the integrated telco once again. So we offer the infrastructure, we offer the platform, we offer the applications. And then, many years ago came something called IP, not intellectual property, Internet Protocol. And this is quite interesting. There were very few telcos who actually approach it from the lens of, you know, disruption. But what IP actually enabled is the first time we had a technology that allowed for separation between the service and the platform. Otherwise, until then, all the services were hard-coded down to the infrastructure, so nobody could actually offer services on top of the infrastructure. But all of a sudden, this technology enabled it. And then what happened? That's when over-the-top. That's when we had Google coming in, WhatsApp coming in. All of a sudden, this enabled new players to offer services on top of our network. It didn't happen overnight, but it was a transition. And I can tell you, I've been in this industry, very few actually spoke about this. We spoke more about it as an efficiency and a technology to make our networks more efficient. But we seldom asked ourselves, will this enable others to come and disrupt me? So that was the first time others began to eat part of the pie and that value chain squeeze. Then came another, and there have been many, but the next one that really has mattered a lot for telco is also when the telecom space, which is very much driven by standardization, when we began to get standards for the cloudification of telco network functions, came the new opportunity. Not only to, and then once again we approach it as efficiency, because many telcos said, oh, we're going to save, this is going to be great to save money. First of all, it doesn't save you money, because if you want to cloudify, it's for hyperscaler economics, it's for elasticity, for agility, and to create new business models. But all of a sudden, that technology enabled a new disruption. It opened up for a new play, not only on the application layer, but for a new play on the infrastructure layer and at the platform layer. And all of a sudden, we're once again squeezed. Didn't happen overnight, but I give this example even internally. I say, this is what happens when you don't ask the so what. And you don't ask it from different lenses. And no technology, any technology, will never be interesting if it does. I always say, does it make me money or save me money? And how does it matter? Is this important for my business model or not? But this is what happens. And most of the technologies that we see now, and I see it many, especially lots of what I would say probably people whom I think are doing a lot of research around AI, quantum, we were just talking about quantum. All of these technologies are going to be massively disrupting. Not from a technology perspective, that's not the most exciting. It's really for what they enable when it comes to business models. That's where you see the rise of startups. So emerging technologies enable startups. And usually startups are to disrupt something. But also, of course, they do give. The good news is that the same technologies that enable disruption are also the same technologies that become an opportunity for reinvention. And for somebody like BT, it's critical. And I am actually very excited because there are many new technologies that now we've lost a number of opportunities, but there are many technologies and many ecosystems arising that will give us new opportunities to reinvent. But to do that, we have to think differently. And they say if you want a different outcome, well, you have to do things differently. And I'll talk more about that. So when it comes to capturing new value creation, we created this. Last year we did a major refresh of our network strategy. And we talk about the roaring 20s for networks. And this comes from our archives that shows here we're digging, and we say it kind of reminds us of today because here is where we are building out our copper networks. Now, of course, we're doing it with our fiber networks. We talk here at the left, it's not about the price of the car, but actually talk about what happens when connectivity fails. Right, so the same here. If connectivity fails, there's a massive crisis. If the networks don't work, there's a massive crisis. And of course, the importance of the network. And by the way, we also talk about the Industrial Revolution. It's all about electrification, mass production, transportation, new media, and connectivity. And we see a similar thing happening. It's all kind of come together in digital economy. We see a number of new ecosystems arising from decarbonization, renewable energy. We see now at the core of the new potential industrial strategy for the UK government. Green energy is at the center of this. Mass production. I was reading, they forecast that by 2030, for every 10,000 manufacturing workers, there will be 1,000 robots. So really, really relevant. AI, of course, becomes relevant at the center of this. Autonomous transportation, really, really key. And actually, it's happening now. I was also sharing with some people I was talking to at the back that I think it was probably 6 months ago or 7 months ago, Sweden received the first big funding from the European Commission to build the largest so far autonomous transportation corridor in Sweden. And Sweden is a very long country. And they did that together with government and the research institutes, the Royal Institute of Technology, with Scania, with Volvo, with Ericsson, and with Telia. Why do you do that? Because, of course, the government sees this as central It's part of their industrial strategy. So it's not something for the future, it actually is happening now. And of course, what we could call it the metaverse, spatial computing. I mean, there are many things that are going to happen around this, you know, virtual reality, augmented reality, both in entertainment, from an entertainment perspective, from an educational perspective, but also from a productivity perspective. So many new use cases are on the rise with really interesting ecosystems that require a really high-performing network. Think about this, when it comes to autonomous transportation, or even, we talk about drones. The use of drones in the public sector for public safety. You can send out a drone in dangerous situations where you don't want to send out a person. Not only do you want to control the drone, you want to have a drone that can capture thousands of photos or even live streaming that they send back to an operations center. That needs to be in real time, massive bandwidth. They need to be able to react and steer. That's very low latency is required. It needs to be available. The network cannot go down. So reliability, availability. So many of the use cases that we talk about here require the best of the best, not only just any network, but really that super high bandwidth, so very high speeds, very low latencies. Security is going to be critical, and trust, because it's all about data. So that's exciting. So we know for a fact that for the next wave of technologies, there are going to be new opportunities, use cases that will drive a new demand for connectivity. However, and of course we say that for us it's about adapting. We need to adapt to these new ecosystems. But not only us, I think that one of the things that we speak a lot about is not only these opportunities and these technologies do not only create an opportunity for BT per se in our business and the value chain. These opportunities create a massive opportunity for the UK. But even for the UK to leverage on this, we need to change slightly direction. And that's about that collaboration. And for us, it's about the technologies, how we build the networks. So the big change to address some of these opportunities is about how we build the networks. We leverage on cloud technologies, we leverage on AI. These networks need to be autonomous. That means that the way we operate the networks with alarms, network operation centers in the future, that really is not sustainable. These networks just need to be able to optimize themselves in real time based on the type of device, the type of application. And that is a massive transformation for us. Going away, we have networks that have been for 60 years, technologies that have been here for a long time. We've operated them in a very different way from how they need to be operated in the future. We go from these what we call stovepipe implementations. That means that networks that serve specific services to networks that can have shared capabilities across different verticals and different services. It's all about the platform play. So we delayer our networks, we disaggregate the networks, we introduce AI at the core of this, once again to make them autonomous. We open up the networks where we actually are abstracting new capabilities through APIs in order to support more product innovation on top of these networks. And so far so good. I think we're on the journey. But one of the challenges that we see is those use cases that I spoke about, these opportunities that will come from, once again, autonomous manufacturing, green energy, autonomous transportation, and so many more, those require much more than a great network in the UK. Those require an ecosystem. It requires that you have enterprises who are investing in digitalization. Because to capture many of those use cases, you need to redesign your operational processes. If you're going to invest in autonomous manufacturing, you need to upgrade your factories. So we're doing our part when it comes to building the network, upgrading our networks to make sure we have state-of-the-art connectivity. We prepare the supply, but there has to be a demand for it. Because you can have the best networks, like having the best highways, but if there are no speed cars or there are no cars, there's no purpose. And there is actually a very strong connection, I'll talk about this, between that supply-demand, your digital maturity, and your contribution to economic growth. And at the end of the day, this is what we are here for as BT. I say we are the national champions of building the best connectivity, that supply, but we also want to engage much more with our partners, with our customers, with academia to try to understand what can we do better in the UK to make sure we create a very healthy balance between that supply and that demand. And of course, in the middle is connectivity. Connectivity everywhere, the best connectivity everywhere. But you also need a digital foundation. If enterprises are not digitalizing, if we don't have the skill sets, if we're not attracting the best talent as a nation, well, then you can have the best connectivity, but it won't help. Green energy is going to be critical. You know, all this data, you know that, how many use Gen AI here? A lot. Do you know on average how much each query, how much CO2 emissions each query? It's between 2 and 5 grams. Each query. Right. So I mean, that's something to think about. If we're going to scale that big time, energy is going to be a massive issue. Not only will energy be a massive issue, we also need to know where you store the data is not where the data will learn. And if you want to provide many of these critical use cases, they require such low latencies that you need to actually process it so much at the edge. That means that there will probably be new opportunities for data centers. You will have to, every nation will have to rethink its data center strategy. Not only because you want to have the data centers, a lot of critical infrastructure, probably governments will need to rethink who owns the data center where I'm putting my critical data. But if you don't have green energy, you're not going to attract foreign direct investment for data centers, because these data centers require quite a lot of energy. So green energy also at the center of this. And the last one, extremely important, is policy and ecosystems. For all of this, the supply and demand, and for all of this to come together, connectivity, the digital foundation, the energy, policies need to be coherent. So what do I mean by coherent policies? Well, you know, if you need to, many governments will need to rethink not to create policies on a silo and per industry or vertical, but really try to think about how to boost that ecosystem. Economic growth, there's an absolute link between digital maturity index, which is what I talk about, and economic growth. And once again, all of these contribute. There are great studies of how to calculate, you know, these four. The maturity of all these fours, you know, are what defines your digital maturity index, and that also is very much correlated with GDP growth.
you. So if you say your question, I will probably repeat it loudly, so hopefully we have picked up for people who are online. Okay. So who would like to ask the first question? Okay. I'll start with Jan, and then I'll go to the back.
As of 20th of January, thereabouts, we're likely to see very severe disruption of supply chains due to tariffs, trade wars, and so on. I'm just wondering whether that's not going to force you and all of us to look much lower down the value chain. You know, everything that you put there depends on us having access to chips and that stuff. I'm wondering whether BT is thinking ahead.
We're thinking, so the question, so for those who don't, is the importance of the value chain, it will force us, and whether we're thinking about this? Absolutely we are. Which is another interesting topic that could, for probably another discussion or lecture, is, the importance of, or I would say the contribution of being relevant in the technology supply chain for economic growth. Once again, also earlier we were talking about, this supply chain, and we kind of concluded and said, I think that 2016 was the year where many began to think about tying the technology race to relative economic growth. And that was when Trump actually began to shout very loudly about the deficit to China. So he wasn't very interested about technology per se at that time, right? But he was very interested in the deficit, and he probably realized, as many others, that deficit came from China being much better in having policies and plans in place to not only participate in the technology innovation race, but to win it, right? And part of that then is the supply chain. So if you look at, that's why IP research, intellectual property will matter, standards are becoming more important, and how do you participate in that? Well, you need to develop technologies. So as a nation, it's going to be absolutely critical, not only to partner, but to develop the technologies. And I say, for the UK, I speak to many people, and I say, listen, we've got to collaborate. It's got to be researched in the UK. The IP has got to be UK, but it's got to be made in the UK. And it's got to be used by the UK and exported by the UK. That's when you participate in the technology supply chain race. It's not enough to have the research. But I think the UK is extremely well positioned. This is my 13th country I've lived, from Asia to the US. I think UK is extremely well positioned, but there's an opportunity for improvement into getting that coherence and really making sure it takes that brilliant research into that development, commercialization, and export to be part of that supply. But we pay a lot of attention, absolutely, because for us it's really relevant. All the technologies that we buy, all our networks are built from technologies that we buy. Some of it we research ourselves, but most of it we buy.
Okay, there's a question at the very back.
Your opening statement was very provocative that the telecoms have dropped 10%. And I guess the question I had at the time was, you were talking about just the telecom industry, the firms like Dominate, or the entire sector, which has exploded. I take it you were referring specifically to those specific carriers like yours that have declined. And I guess my question is, I'm not sure why that matters, except from your raises and profit. But in the larger sense, what do you think the telecoms can do themselves so that they can be growing a lot more? Is it just a matter of taking more advantage of the technology, or what?
So the question was, about the total shareholder return. Oh, sorry, you wanted to go.
Don't try to make some money for yourself.
And try to make some money for us. But it's not only the telcos. The telco sector includes also our vendors. So that is very, very relevant. So if you look at our key vendors, Ericsson, Nokia, Juniper, Cisco, the part of Cisco, that is included in the telecom sector. So not only the telcos. And why it matters? Actually, it matters a lot for many, including governments. Because if the digital connectivity sector is not healthy, there won't be innovation in it. And we see that already now, that not many want to invest in this space because you say, well, should I invest in pharma or telecom? I'll invest in pharma, right?
We take a question at the back on this side. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for a great presentation. My question is, do you think companies like Microsoft will disrupt companies like BT or incumbents that you would move out in the telco space? What's your position on that?
I think that many are interested in the telecom space, but they don't want to own infrastructure because owning infrastructure is extremely capex intensive. And these companies are not capex intensive. These are services companies, right, or software companies. But they do have an interest to play, and you can see they've developed products and portfolio to go into this space because they see this as a catalyst for the rest of their portfolio. So not because they necessarily are super interested in the telecom revenue per se, but because they use this as a catalyst for those services that go on top of the network. But I don't see them disrupt. At the moment, I think they want to, we are partnering, we work with Microsoft. We are partnering with them in a number of areas. But the answer, no, I don't see, not yet. Could be.
Take the question from Hilda.
It's interesting talking about trying to sort of, when you say making sure things are made not only designed but made in the UK and securing supply chains. In other areas of semiconductors, possibly power electronics, I think one of the points that has been made is we are, as a country, we're very good at developing these things, but then everything gets bought overseas. And so we don't actually keep anything on top. And perhaps there's the idea of having a British company that is large enough to keep buying up all the local startups that are emerging rather than being bought out internationally. I'm not sure, I'm not saying that's something BT could do, but are there companies in Britain large enough to start buying this stuff up?
You need to have a lot of money to be buying all that stuff, right? It needs to be, but I'll answer the first one, and this is why I think industrial strategies matter. So if you look at countries that have an industrial strategy, as we say, I want to be good at this, and I'll have the whole full value chain, they will start putting policies in place. You can't never stop anybody from buying, but you can actually but you can. If you look, there are many governments who say, well, I will have the golden share for this. I will have the last. This is a strategic, asset for the country. I will definitely have a say in the foreign direct investment. So that's why I think industrial strategies actually matter. So how important is an asset for a country's economic growth or national security? And where economic security is part of national security. Right?
Gabriela, I'm Vicky Bowman. I was an alumni of here, and I'm now chair of the Global Network Initiative, which sadly, due to your value chain squeeze, you left a couple of years ago. My question is this question of international. I mean, I've been very struck by how focused you are on UK, but this is obviously a very crowded market. Could you say a bit about what BT's international strategy is, or have you, as I seem to observe quite a lot of telcos from Europe, given up on the rest of the world and left that to others? Because it seems to me that's where the growth is. You have so many people in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere who are still not connected.
I think.
What's the strategy?
Yeah, I think the reason many have given up on international business is that it's very hard because there is no coherence in policies to really scale your technologies, your platforms, or your launch. It requires coherence across. Listen, even in Europe, even though there was an attempt to do it, there's no coherence. There's no coherence in spectrum auctions. So if I'm going to launch, if I would have, like Vodafone, we're not Vodafone, but if I would have operations across Europe, at least I would like some coherence around spectrum. Because if I'm going to develop a service for a particular spectrum, what's the purpose if I can only launch it in Belgium, but not in Luxembourg, and 2 years later in Denmark? I mean, you don't reach that scale. So I think this is why many are saying that there's not enough coherence to really scale that business. Plus that it's hard. You know, it is a difficult business at the moment. But we will see. I mean, and probably there might be a new opportunity the more many of these use cases they start to spread, and there's more coherence in the usage of these services. Maybe there's a new interest. But I think, unfortunately, we'll see it more of that trend where many are becoming more local, where they say, well, at least it's my environment. I understand those policies, and I can scale my business.
Thank you. I just wondered, we've heard a lot from our new government about a fully digital NHS. And I just want to remind you of fourfold model about connectivity, around green energy, about digital foundation, and about policy, integrated policies. How does your model map up to actually delivering on a fully digital NHS?
Yeah. I would say that to deliver on a fully digital NHS is much more around policies and the digital foundation of the NHS and the connectivity, because the connectivity, to be honest, is already there. For digital NHS, you don't need critical. You need a reliable and available connectivity, but you don't need massive low latency unless you're going to do remote surgery and so, but that's probably not what they're talking about. But it will be about how do you manage, how do you redesign. Listen, I moved to the UK last year, and I've been now through seeing a couple of doctors, and if I compare to other countries, I tell them, oh my God, there's a lot of efficiency opportunity here. You know, they're not even connected. I was actually told, I went today to Bilbao, and they said, oh, don't forget your diabetes appointment on Friday. I said, but I'm not diabetic. Oh, you're not? You have your annual appointment? I said, no. Oh, then we can remove it. I was like, maybe they put my name. I mean, maybe, you know. So I said to him, maybe you better check if it is a point for somebody else. That's quite, but she just removed it. So I think it's more that digital NHS, which I think would be brilliant, is more about policies. It's about skill sets and about alignment between, you know, redesign of operational processes, right? And that's why I say that is what is required in many cases. It's not the connectivity. The connectivity, to be honest, we have phenomenal fiber. We have 5G. You know, you have some of the best when it comes to connectivity, but we still need coverage, yes, you know, but now we're at 80% population coverage from BT, so that's really great. But what you need on top of this is somebody that goes through that digital journey, and that requires policies and investments.
Yeah, take the question here.
You spoke a little while ago about the economies of scale in the telecom sector. So I'm wondering what you think the factors are which sort of constrain us seeing more multinational telecom companies.
Sorry, repeat your question.
You spoke a little while back about the economies of scale
Yes.
in the industry. I'm wondering what you think are the factors that constrain the development of more multinational telecom companies? It's policies and regulatory. And I think that this probably one of the biggest challenges that many telcos face is that they're, you know, to scale some of this technology, you probably need to have much more collaboration. You need to have policies that allow you to switch off. I'll give you an example. One of the things that really hold many of the telcos back is, you know, I would love to just have a fiber network. We would love to just have 5G. But we're not, actually, you know how difficult it is to switch off old platforms for us? It's unbelievably difficult because, you know, you might have Bertha in Scotland who still has a fax, or who you know, go like, well.
Let alone all the trains.
Yeah,
Trains went around without faxes, remember, in this country.
So, I mean, and I'll give you an example. And I actually was talking to some regulators last week, and I said to them, listen, on the one hand, we want to have net zero, we want to digitalize. To offer some of these best services, you need fully automated network. Now, I can't automate 2G, I cannot automate copper or PSTN. I need to be able to switch off those, not to mention how energy inefficient they are. So I need to be able to switch them off.
But we are forced, more or less, to always be able to offer the same service that we offered 30 years ago on the new platform. Do you think Microsoft would ever agree? When Microsoft comes with a new OS, they don't say, oh, and by the way, yes, okay, oh, you have your old PC from the 80s, yeah, we'll make it backward compatible and we'll make sure the new. No, they'll say, here's a new OS, it's a great new application, we have lots of features, and by the way, the little button that you had on the right side here doesn't exist any longer. That's it, right? Because they need to move on. We also need to move on. So these are the type of coherent policies that I also talk about as well. How do you make sure you support the evolution? It's a give and take. But I think this is what's hindering much of that scale. How do we make sure that we truly are always introducing the latest technologies, the latest platforms, and that we're allowed to migrate our customers to those? But actually the policy says you can't force anybody. So if they don't want to, it's very difficult to, and then we're stuck with these platforms. That's for me insane.
Basically, do BT have a policy of employee spin-outs for startups?
We don't have. So the question was around spin-outs. Today we don't. We don't have either BT Ventures, for example. This is something that we might consider in the future, especially because I'm driving very much myself, research commercialization. The same for us. We have 5,400 patents in BT. That's a massive patent portfolio across, cyber, AI, but we don't really do much with those patents. And of course, one opportunity would be spin-outs. Another opportunity would be collaborations. We're trying to now establish new. We have our research commercialization. Carol, please do reach out to her. She's in that team, driving partnerships. We want to shift from just partnering for, good. We're saying we partner for good, but also for commercialization of research, right? So we are going to be establishing new programs for this because this is really important for us.
Thanks again, Gabriela. Very nice presentation, very clear. My question is going back to your point on collaboration and competition, and then the idea of ecosystems. And I'm wondering in the future how you see things playing out, if you like, in the battle of ecosystems, where you've got vendors, as you mentioned, like Ericsson, that recently have formed new ecosystems with Google and other kinds of partners. How do you see that sort of shaping up competition-wise?
Yeah, that's an interesting. So collaborations. I think we will see many more of those type of partnerships that Ericsson has made. And for those of you who don't know, so Ericsson acquired a company called Vonage, which is really about that. It's an aggregator for API exposures, attracting developers. They've done a separate joint venture with many of the telcos to try to scale that business, signing up with Google and so on. I think we will see much more of that. But even that is sometimes restricted by policy. Right, so regulators want to have a say in this, and I think this is because many regulators are kind of stuck. They want to boost it, but they want to control it. It's not a utilities, but you would like it to be like a utility. So, and that's the tension that we need to navigate under. But I think many more, and we're following this ourselves. And I actually encourage. I like those type of collaborations. I like change.
Kate, can we check whether there are any online questions?
No, we've got 20 people online, but they're very, very quiet.
Shout at them. Okay, so back to the room. Yes, we take it on there. Let me go.
So I liked the way you described the delayering of the telecoms value chain across the stages. There's two types of reactions that BT might have to that delayering. One is to revert to the bottom of the stack, so you do what OpenReach is now doing. OpenReach is doing fantastically well.
Yes.
At the bottom of the stack, so there is a business there. Or you try and look for other opportunities further up the stack, which generally are better. We've had various goes from small
Yep.
core infrastructure business?
Mm.
Is that the future?
Well, I think we will have to see, but this is a type of discussion that we need to have, right? And that's why it is important to understand that value chain. So, you know, OpenReach would be like a netco. If we only did OpenReach, we would become a netco and not a servco. We wouldn't be an integrated. It would be a much smaller business, perhaps a very healthy business, but we would be much smaller, right? And that's, I think, the challenge of being, you know, when you have shareholders, I mean, you know, they will want, they want growth, they want it to be as big as, or even bigger. But this is why if you remember this slide where when I said we're being eaten from the middle, actually a netco has a much higher valuation. So I sit on the board of TDC Net, which is a Danish netco, which was an integrated, they were TDC Group, they were acquired by private equity and pension funds, and it was broken up. It was broken up into a servco and a netco. And the valuation of the netco is much higher than the servco, even just by doing that separation, right? You got transparency. Now, TDC Net is both a mobile and a fixed network. Now, it's quite interesting to see a fixed network has a higher valuation than a mobile network. Why? Because the life cycle, while the capex is very intense to build fiber, once you have the fiber there, it stays for a very long time. Mobile networks are modernized every 7th year, more or less, right? So it's just a little bit more volatile. So of course, I think that's why it is interesting now that the value chain is being disaggregated. That's why you see new players coming in at different, you know, at different parts of the value chain. And certainly this is interesting for somebody like BT to at least understand, would that be our future? I think being an incumbent, you know, and serving, we have such critical customers, very special, what we call special customers. And they require from us that we deliver also the services on top for national security, for many, many things, right? So I think that's something we want to continue doing. However, I do think that we absolutely need to rethink, because the market is not growing, right? And if it's not growing, there's only so much you can do. But once, as I showed, it's not like it's a dark, that there are no opportunities. To be honest, I think that the biggest obstacle is culture, as in most organizations, right? But that's why I love, and I haven't met many of you, but I love coming to academia. I mean, that diversity of thought, you know, really, we have to bring together many more thinkers. You know, what does the technology impact on society? What is the culture I need to change? How about my processes, operating models? All of this thing comes together. Because ultimately, telcos are, it's just such big organizations. They've been around for a long time. We have been cash machines. So, you know, there's still people in telcos like, well, money's not an issue. I would say, yeah, it is an issue. You know, it's like, so and time is of essence. So it's really more cultural, very often, more cultural than it's not the technology. You see how many are making money out of AI. And why are we not making more money out of AI, right? It's a cultural thing.
Very interesting perspective. I mean, you make a wonderful analysis if you look at different quarters by quarter, the different challenges that BT and telecommunications are facing. But I'm wondering, how resilient is the industry of BT, you say, over the next 5 or 10 years, being able to develop new business models or navigate your way through this?
I think that the actual network services, as we spoke about from a network, that is super resilient, because you don't have entrants that come in this space. It's really capex intense. I mean, the assets that we have, they're already there. Those nobody's gonna come and replace them or build on top of that. So that is super, and that's why netcos are valued so highly, because actually it's a good business to be in. I think where we struggle is really the service. That's why I had this slide, you know, when I said we're used to, it's the services. You know, the largest communication services company today is Microsoft. It's not the telcos, right? So it's really on that top layer, the software, things that go much faster, where we've really missed out. But I see a new opportunity, and maybe do I believe that telcos have the right to play in services? I think very little. Why? Because services is a global business, right? That's how it is. Look at over the tops, and you need to be very niched. I think, however, for some certain type of services which have to do with trust and security, there I think telcos have a really strong right to play. I think also services, if you look at one of the areas that we have a very strong patent portfolio is in cybersecurity. So what has made us so strong in that play is because at the heart of cybersecurity, of course, is AI. It's all about analyzing and responding, right? So first detection, analysis, and respond. So we use a lot of our research with small language models, large language, we all use all kinds. But at the heart of this is data. So think about it, for us, we have every second, we have so much data that goes through in real time through our network. So our models are learning every second. Now that's a really strong play. But that requires, of course, a shift into more software. What are you going to commercialize? You probably need to have a stronger data center strategy and so on. So I feel extremely I absolutely do think we're entering that next wave of new opportunities. But what I push internally is that we have to change our culture. It won't be the technology. I'm not worried. We have so many skilled people in BT around technology. That's the least of my worries. My worries is, where do I have product management? Where do I have developers? And who will be able to sell these products when mostly we sell SIM cards, right, and subscriptions? That's a big shift. But it's doable. Actually, technology is more difficult. But I do think that telcos have a very strong right to play, and particularly as we enter into a world where data sovereignty is going to be key. Who handles your data? Where is your data handled? Can you trust them? Do they comply with your national policies, or do you trust a Google who, is your ally but doesn't necessarily need to live up to national policies when it comes to how they handle your data?
Okay, we are close to 7 o'clock. There are a number of things to do now. The first is to thank Gabriela for her amazing vision and understanding, and I also want to thank her because she's obviously the right person to make this happen in the UK. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
As I'm sure you know, these events take a lot of organisation. So I also want to thank Carol Fletcher and Sarah McKenzie at the back from BT for all the work they've done from the BT side. This event is part of the Pembroke Corporate Partnership Programme, and so I want to say thank you to Kate Parsley and Michael Pritchard, who's busy opening bottles at the back, for doing the work in the Corporate Partnership Office, and to Sally March for dealing with the live stream. There will be a write-up of the event, which will be published eventually, and the video will go online, and there'll be all the Twitter and stuff like that. If you're leaving straight away, have a safe journey home. Thank you so much for coming. But, as I said at the beginning, this is really the transition from the sort of the formal question and answer session to informal discussion around drinks. So please, if you can, stay to have some drinks with us.
Mike, if I may, apologies, this is highly irregular, and I know I'm standing between you all and the champagne at the back of the room. But there is one more thing to do this evening. So it was mentioned at the beginning that this corporate partnership between BT and Pembroke College has been running for over 20 years, and it's been a very fruitful relationship, not least, I think, because of the way it's evolved over time. But there's been one thing during that course of that relationship that has been very much constant, and that is our corporate fellow, Professor Mike Payne. And unbelievably, Mike, I don't know if I should say you have retired.
I have
Mike, or
retired,
you
yes,
have
beginning of
retired.
this academic year. I'm gone. I'm now emeritus. I'm as useless as I have been for the last decade.
Mike, we wanted to take the opportunity this evening to say thank you from all of us at BT for the energy, the passion, the wise counsel and everything else you provided to us over the course of that relationship. And we have a little something for you that we hope will remind you of the happy times during the relationship. So,
Okay.
Mike,
Well, thank you very much. And if you
everyone wants to see you open it now.